I see a lot of people asking about vintage lenses and whether or not they're applicable. I've been super stoked about the vintage lenses I've used. If anything, they've actually helped increase my production value because I went from a kit lens on a Canon T2i to primes, and it made me realize the benefits that I have. So the two I have here are a Tacumar 55mm 1.8, and then this is a Tacumar 135mm f3.5. So a little slow on this side, super fast on this side. The great thing about these lenses is the fact that you can get them really cheap. And I picked up mine for I think $20, and ironically I shelled out the same for the adapter. And that's one thing that I'll say about these adaptations that you want to do is the fact that you want to make sure that you buy a good adapter. This one's a photodiox. They're called M42 to EOS mounts. When you're looking at these, what you're trying to find is the screw-on type. Now, you can adapt a lot of ones. I'm going to talk about the Tacumar M42 mounts just because they're the ones that I use. They're the easiest to adapt, and I've had great luck with them. So they're a screw-on. You'll notice very easily. You may call someone on a Craigslist ad or something and say, is that an M42 mount? And they'll go, I have no idea what that is. But then if you look, there's a screw on it, and 42 stands for the 42 millimeters that is the thread diameter. So these will just screw on, and if you're on a budget, buy one adapter and then, you know, screw your lenses on and off. But if you can afford it, buy an adapter for each one of your lenses, because I was too cheap in the beginning about that, and it's a waste of a lot of time because it's a lot of screwing to get it off, whereas with the EOS system what happens is it's just a press of a button, done. So like I said, I shelled out a lot for this one, and overall $40 for a prime that just kicks ass. I do have a hood with it that I was able to find. I always recommend using a hood. Matte boxes just don't do it for me. They're just too large and cumbersome, whereas a hood I can carry around with me at all times. And the best thing you can do is, if you are going to get filters for this, try and use step-up rings. I have a 49 to 52 millimeter. 49 isn't a very common thread size anymore, and 52 is though. So especially for modern DSLR lenses. So if you're going to do that, use a step-up ring with these. I don't find any caveat with these at all. I mean, in the scope of things, I'm using a lens that's 20, 30, 40 years old. But the build is super solid. I had a nifty 50, the Canon one, and I dropped it once. Only lens I've ever dropped in my life, and it blew up into 1,000 pieces, totally unrecoverable. And after that, I was just not a fan of that lens and knowing it could break so easily. So that was $100 plus tax on sale. This was $40, everything said and done. So it's all metal construction. I don't have to worry about when I drop it, ding it, and then on top of that, if I lose it, especially this 50 millimeter, super cheap. So the M42 mount vintage lenses, I'll attach a video that I shot with only the 28 millimeter, 55 millimeter, and the 135 millimeter. And that's all I had on a 5D Mark II, and I think it was probably one of my best pieces that I really invested myself in. And when I use primes, I find that I compose a lot more, like I think a lot more. I can't just quick and dirty punch in, punch out, and call it a day. I think about my composition a lot more, and I definitely think about lens compression a lot more, and I talk about that in another episode. But once you start thinking about how you want to space things, how things to feel, instead of like, oh crap, I have to shoot this at this length because that's, you know, I'm in a tight space, so I have to shoot wide angle. You start getting a little more creative when you're on a fixed focal length. And then this is the 135. I don't use it so much on my 60D because 135 has a weird crop and it's huge, and I got to step back 20 feet just to make this practical. But I do use it once in a while, and it was a workhorse on my 5D Mark II, but I actually went back to a crop sensor. And this was just a metal hood that I found that happens to be stock with the Tacumars. And again, the reason we use vintage lenses is because modern lenses have an autofocus in them, and they go from closest focus to infinity in about a quarter of a turn, which makes pulling focus really hard if you're trying to do something artistically. Whereas these old lenses were meant for precision because there was no autofocus, and so you get these really long throws. Like if I have this on my camera, sometimes I have to like curl my wrist around like this and then make that turn, or conversely, it just turns and turns, and it's buttery smooth. But you get nice long throws. So when you throw a follow focus on there, it just is awesome. It gives you a lot more control and a lot more focus. I do photography as a hobby, and I really like the feel of the old lenses on my modern body. I don't know, it's kind of nostalgic. It's nice, but gives me more focus. And again, it focuses on composition. When I have an autofocus photography, what happens is you tend to blast. You're just like bam, 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 bam. Whereas with these, I took time to take the photo and compose a lot more. So they kind of limit you, but it kind of force you to be more creative and slow down. And I think that's the biggest mistake I made as a filmmaker when I was starting out, was just go, 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 go. And I definitely suffered for it, where the piece that I'll show around the Shawnigan Lake water, I took my time with each shot and forced myself to find the composition I needed within the primes. So the ones I'd recommend are the, I like the Tacumars. They're the M42 mount, and you can get a 28 millimeter f3.5 pretty easily. You can even get a 2.8. It's pretty fast. So the 28, the 55, and then I have an 85, but that's a Rokinon. And other than that, I feel like my lenses are really well rounded out that way. They're fast, and I'm on a crop body, so probably the only thing left for me to get is actually something wide angle. But at this point, when you go vintage, wide angle doesn't get too good. So I'd really recommend these. Bomb-proof, really great build quality, and nice long throws. And I mean, if you get really ambitious, you can hack your own lenses so that you can declick that aperture if you wanted. For me, it's not a big deal.